But coming back to your book, the dynamic between God and Lucifer is like extremely central to your story.
So my goal with this was to unite society around a vision of peace. And in order to do that, I had to create a relatable story. And so, everyone, big problem on this world is all the different religions that we have. Everyone thinks their religion is the best religion, they're the chosen ones, and there's morals, and they come along with different religions. And I wanted a way to convince people to open their minds, to think of, look, I know you've been taught this, but why does God allow the suffering of innocent life? Anyone that has the ability to prevent the suffering of innocent life and chooses not to is evil.
It's November. You guys have been asking for amazing guests that we continue to have on the show. Amazing conversations. Today's no exception. I am honored. I'm pleasured. I'm excited. I'm all these amazing, happy feelings in my emotions going on right now that we have an amazing guest coming on the show today. He is somebody that I thoroughly enjoyed our pre-conversation and getting to know him and going through his social media journey. I just think he's just has a great message for the world. He's an author, which is pretty cool. We'll be diving in deep into his amazing book, In the Beginning, which I think is one of the coolest books, different mindsets, because for everybody who knows me personally, I kind of only read like those self-development or business books, but it's always great to take a break and actually read some amazing books like this. And I think he's actually inspired me to stop reading all these books like Atomic Habits and Think Like a Monk and all these self-help books, because they all relatively have the same message. But when I'm able to think with a book like this and even having great conversations with him. So he is an amazing author coming out of the US this morning. He's married, obviously, and he's got an amazing cat named Patches we'll be getting on to today. But like I said, we've had such a blast getting to know each other, and I'm looking forward to the next 25 to 30 minutes of sharing his story on the Logistics Monk Show, the sanctuary for storytelling. So this morning, we want to introduce our amazing guest, Nick Girard. Welcome to the show, brother. How you doing?
What's up, Ryan? What a nice intro.
Man, well, you know what? If anybody Googles your name, you kind of get out there, you are on a couple of podcasts, right?
A little, like, I'm trying, like, the indie author, pounding the pavement, it's a process. But no, thank you. Yeah, thanks for having me here. This is really cool. You've got a good show. Like, I like your audience. I like the topics you talk about. I came from sales too. I'm still somewhat in sales sometimes, but yeah, this is a good connection we have here. I like it.
It's awesome, and it's just not the hair alone. It's very, very rare that I get to bring on people on my show who have better hair than myself.
Oh, please,
But today is the exception.
your hair's amazing. You
We're
look
awesome,
great.
brother. Oh, thank you, brother. I do appreciate that. So for our audience and everybody out there wanting today, let's get into it. Tell us a little bit about yourself that,
Sure.
the audience would definitely love to learn.
Sure. So let's start, I guess, where I'm from. I mean, I'm kind of from all over the place. I don't even know where I'm from anymore. Actually, I was born in Portland, Oregon. My family went to Arizona, then Washington State. Then after that, I went to college near Pittsburgh area. And then after I graduated, that's where I met my wife in college. We bounced around from like the Philadelphia suburbs, San Diego, New York City, Miami, and now I'm here in Wilmington, Delaware, which is weird. Have you ever met anyone from Delaware? But we just don't know we don't really know where we belong. So we're just trying to find where that is, really. So bounced around quite a lot. And my professional life, well, I guess I have two jobs, one of passion and one of necessity. My job of necessity is in the financial world. I work in sales and operations, various different companies. And that's what's kind of been taking me different areas of the United States. But my job of passion, what I love doing, which I don't really get paid to do much at all, is writing. And so, yeah, I'm an independent author. And we'll get into it, obviously, but I self-published a book called In the Beginning on Amazon. And that's really what I care about a lot. And I know we'll get into this, but the reason I started writing was because of the job I don't like, my job of necessity. But, we all do what we have to do to pay the bills. And but yeah, there's been a kind of a cool story behind how I got started with writing, and yeah, it's a it's a quite a process for sure.
Well, I love that you said that, right? And I want the audience to understand that.
Yeah,
Everything that Nick just said, you have that job that is your passion job, and then you have that job that is like of necessity, the ones that pays the bills, the
yeah,
not so fun job. And I am in the belief, Nick, that you shouldn't do your passion job as like your full-time job in terms of
mm,
it has to be the one that pays the bills and do all those things. And here's my reasoning for it. When it becomes a job and it becomes a career, it's cool at the beginning, and for
yeah,
what it's worth, like it does. I could be wrong on different points here, but then you start to get it becomes a work, and when it becomes
yeah,
from
yeah,
career to work, I definitely
sure.
don't believe that. So, like, I work in logistics. I've been in logistics for 6 years as a sales rep. Do I love it? I really don't. I don't. Like, I
I'm
truly
with
don't.
you.
I
Yeah,
love the commission checks. I love the
I
people that
know.
I bill, and I love all those things. But could I see myself being like a 20 to 30 year veteran? Like, for me personally, this is my passion project. I would love
Yeah,
to, like, get paid to do these things, and we do have those options. But can you talk to the audience a little bit about that? I want to go in depth with that
yeah.
passion versus having that one that pays the bills.
Yeah, sure. I'll walk you through like how I kind of started into this passion. Is that kind of go that route? Yeah, sure.
Let's do it.
So, I mean, I've always been searching for purpose, and my purpose comes through writing. And I growing up, I wasn't sure. I always kind of liked writing. I did a little bit in college, nothing major at all. And then, I hope you don't mind me saying this. This is a little personal, but when I graduated college, I had a pretty hefty student loan debt, and like a lot of us do. And when you have debt to pay, you don't want a job, you need a job, and you just take what you could get. And so, like, I got involved in the financial world, and I didn't want to at all. That was that. So I started in about 2008, and yeah, like you were just saying yourself, like I really can't stand this type of work. I really have a hard time with it. It's not. I mean, I've done sales too in the financial world, mostly sales and operations, but like there's a lot of pressure. I'm sure you have a lot of pressure in your sales logistics world, and in my world, like it's unnecessary. I'm not doing anything for the greater good of humanity, and that's what really started bothering me. Was that I wasn't doing. I'm like anything, and I didn't have a choice because I had to. I'm in debt. I nothing I can do about it for school. And so what really I guess, changed the way I felt was like, I'm at work. This is when I lived in New York City. And you're sitting at your job doing your mundane, awful tasks, and like the news is playing in the background. You got TVs everywhere. And, it's one tragedy after another, just like it is today. It's one awful thing after another. And you feel so trapped and depressed because you're like, I want to help humanity in any way possible, but what am I going to do? And especially, I can't even explore other avenues because I have to pay these bills. And so that's when I was like, okay. And I kind of just one day started jotting down little ideas in this journal my wife gave me, and it turned into me just kind of keeping that going. Like on the subway after work, I created this story. We'll get into that. A story would inspire humanity, and like I would literally put pen to actual paper on the subway going home from New York, leaving the office to go to my little apartment. And like, I mean, it's impossible to write on the subway in New York because it's so crammed. But then we moved to Philadelphia, and then I really started doing it because in Philadelphia it's not nearly as packed. But that's how I started it. It's like taking that energy from work, like hating and being depressed and like wanting something to help, and I channeled it into building a work of fiction. This is my book in the beginning, and that energy was like really powerful. Like depression, anger, like and love, like those are what really drove me. Mostly anger for like the world and why it was operating the way it was. And I just, I just kept on doing that. And then finally, I had a full a book written down, and then I just kind of went and edited it. Like I did like 17 drafts, and finally got the finished piece. But yeah, that's how the path I took. Is just like just wanting to do something in the world, and I chose writing. Yeah.
Chose writing, and that is so cool. And a lot of your podcasts that you've been on, you're going to be on, they're going to be like, okay, tell us about in the beginning, right? And
Yeah,
we'll get into that a little bit here, but
yeah,
like I said, for our show, I like to keep it a little bit different. But you mentioned something that really resonated with me, Nick, was that your wife gave you that journal and then you kept
yeah.
on writing, and then you talked about your 17 drafts, and then you kept on, you just became a writer. From you just took that energy and you went in there. Can you talk for our audience in the terms of like the support that you got from your spouse? Because I feel like that's such an
Yeah.
underlining something that we don't really talk about. Like, even when I'm doing my show here, my wife is like my biggest fan,
Yeah,
and being
me
that support, and
too.
we don't give them the flowers. So can you talk about, I
Oh
want the
yeah.
audience to under that if they want to make a change for their life, follow that passion, and they do have the support of their spouse, how can they honor them? Because sometimes we do take it for granted.
Oh no, you and I are really similar, I think, Ryan. Yeah, like my wife is the same. Like I would be nowhere without her. And that's a lot of what I is part of my book too, is like the female lead. Or I mean anyone's lead that you love. Like but I really believe, especially for men, the female lead, like she just encouraged me, she just like it kind of steered me the right way. And like the more I took her lead, the more empathetic I became. And I think that a lot of the female, I think that's a defining thing of the female lead. It's like if you're a man and you're with a female and listening to them and kind of taking their advice on all matters. I mean, they just have a better way of looking at things. So the more empathetic I became, the better I was able to write. And part of the story like includes her in it. There's a it's kind of violent. There's a lot of it in this book, but it's she's part of the story. But I think the comment you said of like how important it is. I mean, I mean, I always anytime I'm on a podcast, I've been on just a few, but I always try to say that it's like it's of giving her credit. It's like, look, I wouldn't think the way I do. I wouldn't have these visions of of peace that I have. I mean, I always wanted that, but I was never really able to put myself in someone else's shoes, and that's what I'd really try to do. If you see someone that's suffering, there's a big difference between sympathy and empathy. If you sympathize, you're like, oh yeah, I feel bad for you. But you empathize. Look, I'm going to imagine what it's like to be in your shoes and what you went through as best as I can, and then you start understanding. But that really helped me write. I just like took that lead, and it's so special. It's a big deal. So I'm so cool. It's so cool that you said your wife's your biggest fan, because mine too. I'd be nowhere without her. I'd be under a bridge. I don't know what I'd be doing, man. I wouldn't be in a good spot. I tell you that.
See, and that's the amazing aspect that we have of our spouses, and the lesson that the conversation that we just had, like honor them,
Yeah,
acknowledge them. Don't just take it for granted, because sometimes that support, we just assume that it's just going to be there and we expect it from our partners sometimes. But, we do have to acknowledge that. I saw something a couple of days ago, Nick. It's called the bird test. And this was done by some kind of philosopher like years back. But he said this was a test he did with all couples to see if they would last for a long time or they would break up.
oh,
And
cool.
the simple test is that if one person looks out the window and says, "Hey, look at that bird," partner A is gonna be that person who's like, "Oh my god, I wanna come see the bird. What kind of bird is it?" And then you're both staring at the bird.
Yeah, yeah.
Partner 2 is gonna forget it, but like,
Uh,
"Forget it. Yeah, who cares? It's just a bird," right? And then obviously
yeah.
partner A lasted, quite a bit. So I thought that was pretty cool, and I love that conversation. But let's get into your book, my friend. Let's get in the beginning. I'm so
Woo.
excited. I got a bunch of questions for you. I am reading
Yeah.
it myself. I'm so thankful for it. So, like you said, we have the why, the reason why you wrote the book. Let's hear about the what. What is in the beginning?
Sure, sure. So this book changes the story of creation, reverses the roles of the afterlife in order to challenge God and traditional thinking. So it is a very bold story. And I respect your beliefs. I respect all your listeners' beliefs, but it is pretty controversial. I'm basically, it's a story about an evil God that is choosing to torture humanity in order to destroy the earth. And it's a way of explaining why the terrible events are happening in our present society. So the book. Think of in the story, God is evil, the devil is good, and they're combating for control of the afterlife. They're using humans as pawns to change the fabric of existence. And instead of God creating the earth, the devil creates the earth and creates the earth as this beautiful gift for God. And then I describe God as this evil manipulative ruler that chooses to do that wants to destroy the earth because God is jealous of it and creates humans to do that. So very, I mean, look, this is a very I'm basically challenging all gods and all religions, comparing what people think God is versus what God is actually doing. And this is bold to say, but what God is doing is torturing humanity. And the main theme of, what I'm saying is very controversial, yes. However, the book is centered around the need for world peace, equality, and true love. Like that can't be denied in this book. And so that's what I created, a way of explaining why all these horrible things you see happen across the globe by recreating the events of creation. I know there's a lot to unpack there. And look, I'm not here to offend anyone or anything. I'm not saying, oh, this religion. No, not at all. It's really a unifying read that will bring society will help unite society around a shared vision of peace, living together in harmony. Yeah.
And you don't have to even preface by saying that, because we're in a free thinking world, and I love this book. I remember when we had the pre-chat, Nick, you were telling me, this is controversial. You're kind of giving me these warnings, and I feel like I think I told you in the pre-chat, stop that. This is, acknowledge it. This is the book that you wrote. This is your masterpiece, right? So, you don't have to preface it by saying that. Even for myself, I told you I was a big fan of Supernatural, and Supernatural, the TV show, actually flipped that. Where actually demons and Lucifer was actually pretty cool, and then God was, and angels were quote unquote dicks because of all the suffering, and then God just left. But coming back to your book, the dynamic between God and Lucifer is extremely central to your story, from what I'm reading it so far. Can you just talk a little bit more how did you approach these characteristics in with these two powerful entities, right? Because when we're grown, God and Lucifer, these are so big, magnifying characters, and really I would say probably the first characters that we learn about, because from our parents or wherever it is. But how did you approach the characteristics of both entities?
Great question. So my goal with this was to unite society around a vision of peace. And in order to do that, I had to create a relatable story. And so, everyone, big problem on this world is all the different religions that we have. Everyone thinks that their religion is the best religion. They're the chosen ones. And there's morals, and they come along with different religions. And I wanted a way to convince people to open their minds, to think of, look, I know you've been taught this, but why does God allow the suffering of innocent life? Why are we worshiping a God that allows that to happen? Anyone that has the ability to prevent the suffering of innocent life and chooses not to is evil. And so that's the whole point of me flipping who is good and who is evil between God and Lucifer, is to do just that, is to open someone's mind and say, look, why am I worshiping God? Because God's allowing these awful things to happen. If God is there and God chooses not to do anything, or God creates it, it means that God is evil. And so that's the whole structure for it, is that we're with the main goal of convincing people to stop worshiping God. Yeah, that's a story. I like that argument too, and that's a lot of how I write, is creating a good, solid argument that people may disagree with, but they can't help think about. When you say, why does God allow the suffering of innocent life? It's a pretty big question for someone to answer. It's yeah, you're right, it is happening. So, I've sent this book to we'll get into it, I'm sure, but I sent this book out to a lot of people, and religious people have read it, and a few religious people I've sent it to have told me, look, your book is pretty bold, and I had a hard time reading it, but you make a good point. And I've even had some religious people say to me, look, I couldn't finish it. It just goes against my beliefs. I couldn't read it. It's a tough one. It's a real adventure, and it hits home pretty hard. But yeah, that's how I got into those different characters, is that creating a relatable story that will open people's minds to accepting something different. Sorry for that.
No, not at all. This is, hey man, this is a conversation. We don't have a time limit. Don't worry, we got a timer, nothing like that. I love that thought that you brought up, because for us, even myself, when we do our show, or when we do even my logistics sales and everything like that, everything in my life, I want it to be thought provoking. And I think with this being thought provoking, where it's okay, there might be right, I love the gray area. I know there's certain things that are black and white, like don't put your hand on the stove, but it's what if I just put like, for 5
Yeah,
seconds, kind
yeah,
of like tippy toe
I
a
know what
little
you
bit.
mean.
And the point that you keep making is that, if God's supposed to be so ever loving, like why is everybody suffering? We can turn on the news right now. We know
I know.
exactly what's going on right now. And even
Right.
myself, I look at that and I'm like, how can God allow that?
Yeah,
Especially what's going on specifically around the world. And
yeah,
it's just like, okay, let's challenge this. Let's understand
yeah,
this and let's do this because I've always said this. I'm very religious in my faith, Nick, but I've always said this. No matter what, when we look at the Bible, we look at the Bhagavad Gita, we look at the
yeah.
Quran, we look at the Torah, they're all actually written and published by man. This is
Exactly,
as much as
yeah.
they want to say this is the word of God, like it's not
All
God.
right.
Well, like it's still you'll see published by XXX wherever
Yeah,
and things like that, right? So there can be lost in translation, things like that. But coming back to your story, because I was really intrigued about the relationship between Dave and Charlotte
yeah.
truly being like the heart of your story because like you just find so much vulnerability and so much resonance between both of them. What motivated you to focus on their journey specifically, and how did you approach portraying their love in a way that would resonate with viewers?
Sure, sure. Oh, you're right on with your questions, man. This is perfect. So, Dave and Charlotte is my wife and I. No joke. Now, to be clear, none of the intense violence happened to us. That is, the lives of Dave and Charlotte are loosely based on myself and my wife. So, the character of Dave is someone working in New York City in financial sales. That was literally me calling. You know the drill with sales, pounding the pavement with the phone calls, getting people, getting clients in the door. That was me, and just hating my existence doing that. And Charlotte, that's my wife. My wife was an executive assistant at numerous, not that many firms, but a few different firms. And that was her. Like, I mean, a big part of relating, like you said, how I can get those characters relatable to an audience is the passion that I have for how my wife was treated. Like, for some reason, and it's a big problem with men, is that they will treat someone differently because of their position. They will treat them
Yeah.
with less respect because of their position. And a lot of the people that suffer from that are women. And I had a real, like, I'm not a violent guy. I don't think I have a violent bone in my body. I don't believe in that. And it was the first time I felt like I was like, the way people would speak to her and treat her, I was like appalled, like I couldn't believe that someone would choose to do that just because of her position.
Mhm.
And that inspired my writing in there. There's some intense stuff in there. Like, I'm basically, I mean, I don't want to, I mean, Dave is pretty much seeking revenge on the individuals that wronged her. And that's how I got my aggression out, was like I wrote that story down, because I mean, I know countless women can say exactly the same thing about like the mistreatment and the lack of respect in because of their position. And so I took like our love and put it on paper. That's where it came from. It was like me wanting to describe how much we love each other, and how all we care about in this world was just peace and harmony. And it just kind of evolved from there. But that's really, I think a lot of people will say, well, a few people will say to me, they're like, look, I really like Dave and Charlotte. That was pretty wild. I was like, yeah, I'm like, it's loosely based on my wife and I. I'm always hedge it by saying, nothing happened to us. Those events that transpired, that's not real. So I'm like loosely based on us. But yeah, man, that's like pure just passion. That's how I write with like, but that's how I have to write, with
Yeah.
passion. I can't like, I have to create something in my head, and it kind of makes me like upset too. Like, I will cry. I don't hope you don't
No.
mind. I know you won't mind, but I'm kind of a blubbering romantic kind of guy. Like, I cry really easily. I used to get picked on a lot when I was a kid for it, but I will cry when I'm doing something. I will like get like so into it when I write. Like, I will, and I kind of think I do it on purpose because it comes out on the page. Like, you can
Yeah.
feel what I've
Yeah.
got in there. But yeah, that's where those characters come from. Yeah, it's really relatable, and anyone can relate to it too. Like the world of work, I really focus on that in like what I call the New Testament, like which is the result of a challenge between God and the devil.
Yeah.
And yeah, anyone can relate to it for sure. it's
Much
intense.
Yeah, no, it's great to know that, and I'm happy for you to share that. And everybody will put the link to the book in the comments because I think it's such a great book for everybody to read. I want to, like we said, we can talk about the book forever.
Sure.
Like it's such a great book, and I want everybody to take that in. But I want to get to you. Like with these
Yeah,
conversations, I want to get to know the person
yeah,
as
yeah,
well. So as you wrote this book, you went to the 17 edits. Like you said, you went through different emotions,
yeah,
crying, joy, all these things that produce, like basically authoring your first book. What did that feeling feel like the first time? I'm gonna ask you 3 things. The
yeah,
first time you got your final draft, the
yeah.
first time somebody bought your book, and the third and thirdly, the first time you actually, like, read the book in succession, or you gave it to your wife to read
Yeah,
in succession, and you're like, "Okay, let's talk about it."
yeah, yeah, yeah. All right, all right. Oh man, you're great. So first question was,
The
um,
emotion after you got your final edit. So this was it. This was,
final
"We're
edit.
gonna do this." Yeah.
Yeah. So that one, like my final edit was the 17th one, and like when you go through Amazon, you basically you submit your final draft, and they send you like a proof copy in return. Your proof copy is considered your final edit. Like, okay, this is not for sale yet. Take a look. If everything is cool, give your stamp of approval. And so like I got my proof copy in the mail, and I was like, I gotta tell you, I cried. This is when we were in Boca Raton, Florida, right before we moved to Miami, and like I had quit my job and moved down there for it was a huge mess, and I was like writing in our apartment like a crazy hermit because I was unemployed and just like that's all I did was just write. So I got it in the mail, and I was like, I literally had tears of joy. Not sobbing, but I was like, this is it. But I read it the final time, obviously, and there was like a couple of spelling errors too. So I was like, oh Jesus God, good thing we got this proof. But yeah, that's like it was pure joy, man. Like it was probably the greatest feelings I've ever had. It was just like that copy. It was real, a real book. So that's how I felt when I went for the final draft. Yeah. It was amazing. And then just the second one was, I'm sorry, with questions sometimes
No,
I
don't worry, brother. So I should have put it on. Second one, when somebody, the feeling that you had when somebody bought the book.
okay.
Here.
So I won't count my wife. I mean, that sounds terrible. Of course, I count that she read it, but she had read it before. So, but the first like sale was like
Yeah,
because I had told like everyone in my group of friends, which is not very large. I was like so people are buying it just because they know me and trying to support me. But it felt really it just made it real. Like all of a sudden you're just like okay, yeah, like it's real. I can see on Amazon that someone has purchased this. I can like it's a report. I mean, you just feel legitimate. You feel like
mm,
the work you've finally done. Probably the same. I imagine you can relate to this with your show. It's like in your first like I was listening to your first episode, and then your transition to more episodes, and like you just feel
it's
like yeah,
validation.
yeah,
Definitely.
excellent word. Thank you. Validation. You're like the work I'm putting in. Yeah, it's tough. It's you kind of feel embarrassed a little bit. You're just like, oh man, I'm putting myself out there. What if people think I'm kind of weird, and then it just feels good when you keep on doing them, just like your show. And people would buy it. I was like, great. And someone reached out to me when they bought it, and it was amazing, just yeah, validated for just doing your work. It's a phenomenal feeling. So I'm sure it's what you've felt with your show. I mean, you've got a good audience. It feels good, right?
It feels great. It was
Yeah,
honestly, and for everybody out there, the reason why I'm asking these questions is that we're targeting the people right now who are going into 2024, and maybe they hate their job, or maybe they got laid off. The job market sucks right now, and they want to become that entrepreneur. They want to work in sales. They want to do something for themselves. They want to start that podcast, Nick. They want to write that book. This is for them to have these emotions because you're gonna
yeah,
have those ebbs and flows. Nothing in life is gonna be perfect,
mm,
right? We talked about on our podcast a couple of weeks ago that, handling rejection,
oh,
no basketball player, no baseball player, they're going to shoot 100. They're always going to have something for percentages. So for what Nick is saying, I want everybody to actually take that in. He's gone through these different emotions. He went from, am I good enough to do this, to screw this, I'm doing this,
yeah,
to holy shit, we got some spelling errors, we got to fix this, going through these drafts, getting his first purchase, to somebody saying, holy fuck, like, I'm validated now, I am here right now. And
yeah.
Nick, the last one out of that is, how did you feel with your wife finally reading it and actually talking to you about it, right?
Oh,
Because I feel like sometimes, I don't know how you are, but like I know when we get caught in that concrete jungle work, my wife and I probably get about 30 minutes to talk at the dinner
yeah,
table a little bit. It's never enough. And I do have, I am guilty of that. I do need to make more time. But
me too.
when she finally read that book and she was like, what happened?
Oh yeah, like that was so she had read it like I mean she's read it a couple times since I self-published, but when she first read like the draft, the pretty much the final one, the proof, like because I hadn't really had her read it on purpose. You know, I wanted a finished copy for her, and like, obviously we talk about it all the time. She liked the idea. You know, she knows what's going on. But like I was so nervous, you know, and so she took her like 2 days. So when she finally finished, she came downstairs, and she was like, "Okay, thank God, it's good. You got something here." And she's like, you know what? I was really nervous the whole time. She's like, what if it was terrible? You know, I feel something like, oh, you know, she was like, she's like, I closed it and was like, okay, thank God, it's just not the worst thing I've ever read. You know? I was like, and she's like, she obviously said it was good, but like, it was a big thing for her because she was like, you've been doing this for all these years. I'm like, please don't tell me he screwed up and made something really stupid, you know? But I mean, it like we really came together over this, you know. I mean, we obviously been in love, but it's like brought us even more together. Like, you know how things are with when you with your spouse. It's like certain events can like even bring you closer together when you've like
Yes.
gone through something and they've encouraged you, and you're like, you just realize how important that relationship is. I mean, it's so important. But yeah, it felt when she did that and said that, I was like, okay, I feel okay. That's good. You know, that's a
That
great
is
feeling.
amazing, you know, and having that
Yeah.
support is so key. And
Yeah.
I learned so many from our guests, and I've just learned, like, especially from you, you know, like there's these things that you go through in life, and they always don't have to be negative, you know, they can be positive things that happen, and you just grow together. You know, your soul
Yeah.
starts attaching to each other, and you know, one of my favorite things that I've learned about relationships, Nick, it was that in the Power of Now, Eckhart Tolle talks about, you know, we're born, if you're born man or woman, we're born not whole. You know, we're still, it's just like
Oh,
Adam and Eve, right? We're seeking out that
yeah.
other half, right? So when we kind of get
Oh,
connected and we kind of get there, it's
I
pretty
love
cool. So
well said. Yeah, that's a great one. I mean, I totally agree with that. You know, like you feel what you I was really lost as a guy, as a man without her. You know, I mean, I needed that direction. You know, I just needed like to change the way I think. You know, that's why I'm so big on like the female lead. Like, and because I think like a lot of times my wife and I fantasize about how we'd like to see the world be a different place. Like, and fantasize about you know every man that's in a position of power around the world in government or whatever it is stepping down and being replaced with a council of women. You know, I think women have just a much better view of how the world should be. They've just got they can the bigger picture. You know,
yes,
they understand. They're not short sighted. And I think there's not all men, but a lot of men are short sighted. You know, it's just like today I got to make this money today, do this for today, and this, but they lose track of the how we should live as a society, how we should behave, how we should interact. And I think women have a better view on that. But yeah, can you imagine everybody stepping down and it's all women? I mean, I think it'd be for the
I'd be
best.
so happy. You know what? You've given me clarity today, and thank you because you unknowingly did it. So
Yeah.
for me, like beginning of this year, brother, we've on our other podcast we did like empowering women into logistics, and we
Oh,
only
great.
had women on our show from HR to truck driver, like everything in logistics. We just had women guests for two
Great.
months straight, and then even on my show, like the things I talk about, and just being just an ally, like you and I being allies to women, I think it's just so important. And you just give me clarity because I feel like I don't know, like sometimes
Yeah.
you just get clarity by something like this. But I can't thank you enough, man. This has been like so much fun. I hope this has been your favorite podcast so far
Yeah.
that you've done. Let the crowd know, let the audience know how can they get a hold of you, how they can
Sure.
connect with you online.
Sure. So I only have one presence on social media, and it's Instagram. So if you look up Nick D Girard, that's me. I'm on Instagram. I do a lot of really ridiculous things on Instagram. It's like, you know, I'm not, you know how it is social media is. Everybody's like cool and sexy, and I'm not really any of those things. So I just kind of like perform goofy shenanigans as a way that it's like I don't know what else to do, and so that's what I. But yeah, you can reach me on there. I talk to I'm pretty active with like responding to people, always responding to people because I send. That's how I send out books. I send them all over the world through people I meet on Instagram. But yeah, easily approachable. And if you want to look for the book, it's on Amazon. All you have to do is put Nick Girard in the search function, it'll come right up. A true adventure awaits.
It's gonna be a great read, and we'll put, like I said, I'll put it in the show notes. We'll do some promotions too. I'll definitely give away a couple books too because I think it's such a great read for everybody out there. So can't thank you enough. Like I said, this has been such a pleasure. It's such a great
That's
conversation I've
fun.
had with you. One last thing I always ask everybody before we leave, Nick Girard, what is your message to the world, my friend?
My message to the world is that we need to get on the same page of peace. And I always like to think of an example of, you know, imagine like, the International Space Station, and you know who's up there? All the countries. Russia's up there, China's up there, US. I mean, everybody's been through there. And I sometimes like to imagine them looking down at the Earth and saying, look, what is going on up there? And look at us up here. They're just like working together with science and trying to and exploring. It's a beautiful thing. I think everyone should think about that, how we can live together better and accept a vision of peace. And the inspiration necessary for that is also in the book. It's the one I wrote called In the Beginning. Not to be cheating.
Not at all. Thank you so much, brother. We'll see you guys next week. Take care.
Thanks, Ryan.